sessions on this final day of imaginAviation. During the break, we learned of some good news out of Washington. Orville has finally returned to NASA headquarters. This has created great excitement throughout HQ and all the aero centers Orville has visited. Well, there you have it, folks, a happy ending for a warm Orville and the NASA community. And now, let's get back to live coverage of imaginAviation 2024.
Welcome to the future. Well, the last panel of the day anyway. Hey guys, I'm Vic. I'm the futurist for the Convergent Aeronautic Solutions Project, or CAS. And I was kidding about this is the future, but could you guys put the ideal future image on the screen, please? Thanks. So this is the future. So I'm trying to scare you guys before we start this panel discussion. But imagine a future really far away, so far distant future, where humans are, our descendants evolved to thrive in space. They're free to explore and learn. The human body becomes a spacesuit. It's a computer. It has power storage, and we choose to. Some of us may choose to shed our physiology. AI may choose to gain physical form. There's multiple species of AI just to gain experience. So all of these things may happen, but then there may also be enclaves of people that don't have any technology. They have these green societies, could be off-world. There may be mixed realities. And by the way, I want to preface this by saying all of these are just the opinions of myself. And anything you hear on this panel is going to be our opinions, not the official positions of NASA. There's going to be a lot of speculations here. So anyway, so these kinds of futures, they seem interesting, but many of you are listening to this and thinking, well, it could be dystopian, right? I don't want to live in this future. And that's kind of the point. So the future is different for everyone. We want different things for ourselves. We have different values. And one of the, so for example, some of us may want to live in the matrix. Some of us may hate that. And if you think about, for example, religions, right? There's more people on the planet that believe something different from you than that believe the same thing. And so very often when we're doing innovation or when we're trying to imagine the future, it's very hard to think about the ideal or the best future. We're just trying to figure out how to come to some kind of an understanding and empathize with others and build this joint future for everyone. And same thing with the past. We have different pasts. We have Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy. Your childhood determines what career you have. And the other thing is we often think that the stuff that's concerning us today is the same thing that's going to be a problem in the future. So think back 50 years or whatever, and you had nuclear threats or social stigmas, and people thought there's going to be the same problems happening all over the place. The world's going to be destroyed. So there's many of these issues with trying to figure out how to do innovation in the future. And another big one is the lack of convergence. It's not just learning from other domains, it's also learning from other cultures. So if you think about the past, for example, when Europeans visited North America, there was approximately a 50% death rate from scurvy. And the funny thing is the Native Americans knew how to combat this by using pine tea as a source of vitamin C. But it took centuries for this to be discovered, and so many lives were lost. So the other thing is we also tend to have generational amnesia. So we forget things that have happened in the past, whether it's economics or threats of war or disease. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? And if you look at the underground city, if you could put that on. There's an image of an underground city. If you could put that on, please. Thank you. So how would you like to live in this world? So for example, let's say the sea level is rising, people need to move inland, there's severe weather events. Is it possible for us to live underground? Many of you may think this is dystopian as well, but our ancestors did it. For example, ancient Turkey, the Iguanodonts survived the KT extinction event 60 million years ago. So plenty of reasons to do this, and now we have boring technology, drilling technology that allows us to do this. So maybe this is in our future. So anyway, why am I talking about this? Because a lot of the stuff that we're doing in CAS discovery especially, is we're looking 50 years out to see how can society how can aviation make society better for everyone. And as you can see, better for everyone is a difficult concept, right? Because everyone is very diverse. So if we go to the next image that we have on the discovery process, sorry, the image on the discovery process. Thank you. So this is what we're doing on the CAS discovery team, and in a sense, this is a big help wanted ad. This entire panel session. So because of how diverse we are, we're trying to hear voices both from digital tools and human tools, through discussions, through interviews, through talks and webinars. We have collaborative exploration going on where we look at trends, needs, and capabilities. We're trying to envision future scenarios, and ultimately, we're trying to find problem areas and opportunities for aviation that can benefit everyone. And I'll give you some really silly examples of why this is important. So, if you think about the old days where people wore trench coats, why did those stop being in fashion? Well, cars used to have these benches, and before that, carriages and such, bench-like seats in the front, and then gradually seats became smaller. So trench coats kind of became an inconvenience. Also, the kinds of work that we do, the way we travel, paved roads, all of those kind of got rid of trench coats, right? Same thing with, if you think about swimwear, the swimwear industry. When trains connect everything everyone to the beaches, people start to go to the beach, and you start to get a swimwear industry, which is weird because it's now connected to transportation. The opposite's also true. So what if we don't have to take our clothes with us while we travel? What if we just print our clothes or grow our clothes? What happens to luggage bins? What happens to baggage claim? So these are just random questions, but it gives you an idea of the connectedness between something like maybe aviation or transport and even fashion. So we really need this. We need an ecosystem, and you've heard this word throughout the day, of what I call weird and wonderful people. So historians, economists, social scientists, sci-fi writers, orchestrators, and tools. And so our job has been in CAS discovery to assemble this kind of weird combination. So you heard earlier in the event, you probably heard from our Presidential Innovation Fellow, James Villarubia, who was talking about who works on our digital infrastructure, including AI. The discovery lead, Eric Brubaker, he worked in West Africa, the problem of clean water. He has an ethnographics background. One of his interns was on the early career panel. And we use contracts, internships, freelancing, whole number of methods to get the job done, right? So you're going to meet a couple of these weird and wonderful people on the panel today. And I'd like to introduce first Mark Stephen Meadows, who is our sci-fi writer. And Mark, would you please say a few words about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks, Vic. It's nice to see you. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I've got about 2 decades of experience in artificial intelligence, virtual reality. I professionally grew up in the Bay Area and then left around 2001. Started traveling. I've been developing conversational characters in augmented reality and virtual reality for close to a decade, and I founded multiple companies, advised governments, started entities that have ranged from things that we just spun off to small projects to things that got merged, helping Fortune 100 firms for 15 years. I'm an author, as I mentioned, of 4 books on culture and technology. I'm also an artist. I've been exhibiting my work since I was 18. I'm also a 100-time U.S. Coast Guard captain. I've sailed, I think, 4 of the 7 seas. And that has managed to spin my head around and keep me ravagely confused and always curious to be exploring. It's really been an honor to be working with CAS, and look forward to talking about some of this stuff more. Diane is joining us, I believe, also. Is that right, Vic?
Yes. There's Diane.
Thanks, Mark, and hello, Vic, and hello, everyone, and thank you for letting me join this. And I'm still trying to sort whether I'm the weird or the wonderful, but I'll just check the box on both. But yeah, a little background on me. I'm an enterprise veteran. I spent a couple of decades in industry, really as a serial entrepreneur, now turned entrepreneur. So I spent about 24 years at GE, leading marketing platforms and helping lead the digital transformation. And in that last stint, it became clear to me that in order to kind of move that battleship in the direction of goodness, we needed a lot more minds and hands to move the ship, so to speak, Mark, to chase the nautical storytelling here. But I launched and scaled an ecosystemic operation at GE for about 7 years, and it was an incredible experience. And clearly, for me, it was a good model that that I wanted to take into the wild. And so left GE in 2019 and started my own practice. So Shosham Works is a global advisory firm that's helping organizations and nations with ecosystemic transformation. And we're going to get into what that means and really kind of wrestle with some of those concepts here as we go. But again, thank you, Vic, for the opportunity to join, and Mark for the continued partnership. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Diane, you mentioned the word ecosystemic, and Mark, I have a question for you as well. But so, Diane, could we perhaps define ecosystem and ecosystemic, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Yeah, just plain English, right? So ecosystems exist in the wild and in an industry. And when I refer to ecosystems, I'm referring to the industry and society versions of ecosystems. And it very simply is a network of related and interdependent and interconnected actors. Could be organizations, could be individuals, could be academies, but basically actors in a system that are aligned around missions of common purpose and common value. And the ecosystems that we work with really often are networks of networks. So you might have a network of AI interested actors that are in some ways, in many ways, interacting with a network of, say, agritech interested actors. So you have constellations of mutual interest and value coming together, creating and consuming value in very dynamic ways.
Thanks, Diane. I'm seeing actually a question in the chat, if you don't mind, and it relates to how you guys perhaps joined this team, which may be relevant. So Mark used to live on the open ocean, and we had to entice him away from that habitat. So it's the first time he's been living on land. And similarly, so we brought Diane in as well, who's kind of a foreign object in our ecosystem. So perhaps you could both describe how you became part of the team, and if it's possible to throw up the QR code so that you can perhaps click it and figure out how to join our team. Go ahead. I'll start with Mark.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as Vic mentioned, I was living on my sailboat with my family in Mexico and helping us start up building conversational augmented reality avatars. Had a pretty good situation going and received an email that I thought was spam to begin with, thinking, wait a minute, this is actually like exactly what I need to be doing. This, being able to write science fiction with NASA is definitely a dream role for me. And it just kind of became more dreamy when Vic also mentioned that they needed a visual artist to do work as well, and actually someone with some leadership experience. And I thought, there are these details of our life that lead us inevitably to this future that we never really know, but then we find ourselves there, we say, oh, this must have been my fate. Or maybe, I'm just lucky. Whichever the case, that was the origins of it. After having lived in Mexico for 8 years and now returning to the States, found out that here in Brooklyn, it's difficult to actually live on board your sailboat. So we're in an apartment for the moment and busy getting back onto the water for the native aquatic residents there. My feet get cracked and dusty if I'm on land too long. Diane, what's your story?
Oh, a very serendipitous and wonderful journey. So I like you, Mark, just really was excited to receive an opportunity to actually bring some open innovation to bear against the CAS team's vision for the future of aviation. So Vic and the CAS team reached out and wanted to see if we could bring a community of experts and enthusiasts together in order to imagine what the future of society and aviation looks like 50 years out. So we had a lot of fun with that, and we had some really brilliant ideas and conversations, and that evolved into basically doing some work around 50-year futures for aviation. So we spent about 12 to 18 months delivering aviation futures, 50-year futures, for and with the CAS team. And in doing that, we introduced some research sprint methodology, which was fun. And as Vic mentioned, was kind of an unnatural act, but we had a lot of fun, and it persists as a great methodology to bring some deep thinking together. And in doing that, we also started to bring together a community of experts and thought leaders together, first in a series of interviews, and now ultimately in a series of podcasts and webinars and roundtables. We bring together basically global experts, thought leaders, and market makers who are doing deep work, important work in fields that are relevant to CAS study and NASA study. So it's been a wonderful journey, and hopefully driven a lot of value.
Thanks, Diane. That's actually a nice segue to one of the questions in the chat. The question is, when you pull together a team of discoverers, what are you looking for in regards to diversity of thought? And Diane, you mentioned this, the podcast and the webinar ecosystem. And I wonder if the organizers, if you could put up ecosystem triad, the image of industry governance, I think that fits in here, just to show the diversity there. So while that's happening, I'll quickly verbalize it. So there are many dimensions to the future. Obviously, there's the, I mentioned context, so looking at the past. I mentioned the breadth of society. So there's policy, economics, sociology. There's law. There's the environmental side of it, and then obviously there's technology. So we want to make sure we've heard all those sectors at a broad level. But then once we actually start zooming in, and for example, if you look at health and wellness, or you look at climate change, then you start to perhaps target the experts that you need, and you start building a community. So it's kind of like a fractal, or the word Kelly had used in a panel before, a system of systems. And you want to make sure that you have that entire breadth. So I'm still not seeing the image on the screen. Is it possible to put the image up, the ecosystem triad? Thank you. Go ahead. Diane, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, sure. So to Vic's point, we are seeing, and I think everyone's probably seeing it, right? The world is a lot more basically interconnected, right? As we all have just really squarely entered the digital era. The world is more interconnected, and therefore more interdependent, and hopefully more interoperable. And so really, we have to. We no longer can really innovate in a vacuum, right? So we have to understand, as we're innovating, building business, or introducing changes to society or governance, the ripple effects will wash over markets, will wash over society. So we need to understand our advancements within context. And so to Vic's point, we always look at the innovation pathways that we're exploring with a very prismatic view, and keep this kind of triad in the back of our minds. And when we're reaching out to experts, just very quickly to answer the question, in the chat. We and Vic also mentioned this earlier as well, but some of the characteristics that we seek in our community are kind of systems level thinkers, deep domain experts with the courage to challenge the status quo, folks with the ability to deconstruct and recombine in new and interesting ways. We look for curiosity, imagination, humility, generosity, the ability to collaborate, and folks with an appetite for experimentation and risk taking. Really, it's just the willingness and ability to kind of break things and make new pathways and new molds.
Thanks, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I wanted to ask Mark, well, there's a couple of questions. One of them was around imagination that you brought up, Diane, but then going back to the podcast. So Mark, you've been a guest host on the podcast. So what's your experience on the podcast and what can people look forward to? And by the way, there's the QR code when you scan it. There's many ways of interacting with us. If you want to be a podcast guest, you're welcome to do that. You can listen to the podcast. It's called Ecosystemic Futures. And you can also be part of our team. We run sprints. So there's many different ways to participate. If you would like to be involved in an advisory capacity, that's another potential pathway as well. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, we need lots of help. There's so much to do. We're going to all live the majority, I guess, the rest of our lives in the future. So we really have to do a good job inventing this, right? The podcast has been a fantastic adventure. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to speak with some of the brightest minds in the networks that Diane and I share. We've been able to speak with individuals and companies that are performing a range of operations from, for example, building villages of autonomous agents. What happens to a collection of agents when we're looking at a social interaction where they are reciprocally training and learning from each other, being exposed and not exposed to external real-world, real-time data? We're able to speak, and I think I'm able to mention some of these people by name and their groups. Is that correct, Vic? So, this is Rob Alton of Hexagram. And Hexagram's been developing these systems for years now, really looking at the future of social intelligence. The Open Code Foundation, being run by Ben Cerveni, considering how governance and code and the rules of law actually are in some ways the same thing. And now with open source, we can begin to apply artificial intelligence to these systems and really build other reciprocal means of dialogue with society, with governance, and also with industry, using open source models of rule making. This is a whole new way of thinking. I mean, these are people that are essentially questioning the very foundation of society, like Hammurabi's law. What is it? Or the Code of Hammurabi was actually written rules, but we understand it now to be almost kind of like software. We spoke with Trent McConaughey of Ocean Protocol, and Trent and I met around 2016, 17, also developing artificial intelligence within a crypto blockchain economy. Trent was one of the early visionaries that said, what happens if we allow people to contribute on something like a futures market via AI? Can we actually improve AI's method of prediction, which in some ways might be the actual core definition of intelligence? I don't know for sure what artificial intelligence means, but we're working on it, and prediction probably has something to do with it. And then we've also been talking with Jan Bunga and others. By the way, Trent, after our conversations, I've continued forward with him, and we've been developing an idea of a sovereign AI system. So imagine you can have a DAO, which is kind of like a distributed organization that's a little bit like a Coke machine, and it could perform some autonomous functionality, buying and selling what you want. We're looking at other ways to extend this further, open source models of sharing and so on. I'll put a cork in it there, Vic, but it's been a fantastic opportunity to really learn more about this.
No, that's fascinating, Mark. I guess the other thing, you're bringing up this huge vision of how do we change our imagination almost, right? Tying back to Diane's point. Could you both speak to the role of imagination and how diverse cultural experiences and backgrounds play a role in that? So maybe start with Mark.
Yeah, yeah. Imagination, like dreams, oftentimes comes from this deep underworld that we don't really pay enough attention to. And oftentimes, when we're forced to imagine some new future, I find it useful to look at the past and then flip that up, turn it inside out, and try from there. Diane?
Yeah, no, I think that's I have a similar kind of worldview, Mark, and as you know, right? But the futures are coming at us faster than ever, and they're increasingly ecosystemic, right? So we have to Mark's point, Vic, we have these really interesting multi-purpose technologies, right? That are beginning to thread a common fabric across all the facets of industry and society. And if we understand that as the new kind of virtual infrastructure, if you will, we're able to kind of lift human experiences, lift industry, lift governance up to a new level. Everything becomes kind of an app now that or a super app that sits on this pervasive level of interconnectedness, right? So we need to reimagine what infrastructure is, and to Mark's point, rules and models now become kind of code that we can all have a voice in and a choice about, and we can start to recombine the components of society and industry that are intentionally driving better outcomes for humanity. If we aren't intentional, and if we aren't thinking about these futures and imagining what pathways could unfold, then we also have the potential to encounter unexpected collisions and unintended consequences. So we have to, all of us, understand this new system and this new infrastructure and the new level of interconnectivity, and constantly be imagining the pathways and the futures that these new advancements in technologies and models could be unlocking. And we have to be constantly vigilant and intentional about how we combine and innovate in order to drive beneficial versus harmful outcomes. So imagination has a very kind of core role to play in all of our futures, and we have an opportunity, to Mark's point, to really kind of unlock really exciting pathways to human flourishing, if you will.
Thanks, Dan. Well put. And I think both of you talked about imagination, you talked about the connect, digital, physical processes, and Mark, you talked about looking back to the past. And that brings up the connection to unique experiences, right? So I guess, what unique experiences have you guys had that give you a different lens on society or the future, or any of these kinds of these innovation methods that maybe others that are tech focused don't have? And I'll throw that back to Mark again.
Yeah. For me, it's really been traveling. I think reading is very similar to traveling for me, but whether it's been some of the more radical adventures, such as hitchhiking through Baghdad when the looting was happening, whether it's been interviewing militants in foreign lands like Sri Lanka, or whether it's been hitchhiking through Corsica and meeting my wife. Travels have exposed me to new ideas that force me to rethink the presumptions that I've been living with. And I love that. I think that the process of traveling on the ocean as a sailor, where there is absolutely almost no information around you except for a thin blue line, is also a different kind of exploration as well. So traveling is a part of it. I have to quickly also note that whether it's been travels in Second Life or in virtual worlds, that there have been no less stimulating and amazing things. You don't need to even get up out of your chair if you happen to be as lazy as I am. Diane, what would be your answer to that one, please?
Oh, goodness, not quite as interesting and exciting as yours, Mark. But I think what kind of informs my journey or has informed my curiosity has been a kind of a, a serendipitous collection of experiences. So my formal training was first in art history, which really fueled my passion for this interconnectivity between society, culture, and economies and governance. I am fascinated how societies and industry have evolved over time, and what the influences were. And then uh, my experience in business with marketing and finance training. I spent several years opening up new financial markets for a U.S. global organization. So that again allowed me to study culture and economies and industry and the way that those pieces and components come together for value, economic value, and societal value has really informed, I think, my choices for, or my, I guess, passion about ecosystems and economic models and how the platform economy is allowing us to really compartmentalize capabilities and experiences and create digital kind of digital economies underneath experiences and capabilities. And my pursuit in my business is really informed by my aspirations for humanity. So I spend my time supporting folks that are leading work in agri-tech and space, really with Earth and aerospace being the exquisite domains of human flourishing. Those are the areas where I want to support Wicked Works. So.
Okay.
I'm curious, just really quickly, Diane. You're bringing in economics and business management and art and literature. How is it that you're combining such different things? I mean, do you just have the two sides of your brain really tightly tied together? Why are you doing that? What allows it?
Yeah, Mark, we could have a pot in the kettle conversation here, I think, but you'll appreciate this, right? The art is really a reflection of kind of culture and the human experience, and reflects a lot of the best and the aspirations of humanity. And so I think that by basically studying the what is reflected in human works, we can understand the cultural dynamics and the aspirations of the basically the communities that exist. So in there is a lot of art in industry, right? So really configuring business model innovation is a creative act, right? You have to look at the palette with which you're working, right? And put those components, construct those components in a way that is pleasing and valuable. And that is, I think there's a lot of art to business model innovation and innovation as a whole. So, Mark, I'd love your perspective. I'll send that question right back to you, actually.
I think for me, art and technology and culture definitely are wrapped together. I have paintbrushes here on my desk, and I have to look at the ferrule and see whether or not it's coming unglued. I have to, see whether GIMP has been updated with the appropriate packages. These tools that we use are really just methods of conveying culture. I've been, as Vic knows, I've been fighting a lot with different AI systems lately, the authority conflicts over how to modulate desired imagery or words. And I think that culture, art, and technology are inextricably linked. It might be really that there is no difference between technology and art, but that's probably for a more philosophic discussion. All right, Vic, back to you, please.
No, that's great. This image here is something that Mark created to visualize one of future scenarios, I guess. And the reason I like this, you guys are talking about art and technology and business and such. This is kind of a different dimension, but it helps us to visualize the future. So, and it helps us to actually it puts us in this context. And otherwise, we may not have this perspective where we talk about, let's say, there's always more flying, there's always more technology, and at the same time, you can also think, okay, we've solved climate change and everything's green. So this is one depiction of maybe what the world might look like. And I'm wondering, to some people, it's utopian maybe, and some people just like, why is there stuff in the sky?
Hmm.
It just
You
gives
know,
us another lens to examine. Oh, go ahead, Diane.
yeah, actually, double clicking on that too, Vic. I think with the level of complexity that we're all experiencing in the world today, right? Whether that's society or industry, and the interconnectivity, the pace of change, the pace of innovation, I think storytelling and visualization are increasingly important as tools to educate, right? To bring our communities along with us and to convey and distill really complex topics and themes. So storytelling, empathy, imagery are really central to our ability to move forward in a path of, in a direction of goodness together. Without that, we get a lot of noise, almost, kind of a Babylon effect. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, and I think also I want to kind of circle back on this bit about history as well, because I think that so often as futurists, it's easy for us to forget that our ability to project the future is rooted in the vectors of the past. If I read about Hammurabi's code, my favorite book in the world is probably Herodotus. I think I've read it like 8 times now, and every time I read that, I of course uncover something new as one of the classics, but I also find that I have models of understanding better the future from it. And I think that, Vic, you're asking about some of the influences of my life, and I think certainly, reading. I was trained in the classics. That's something that I think we can't let sit down. We are confronted with such radical, shattering change in front of us now. Artificial intelligence is not just disrupting things; it's turning everything upside down, and we're falling in a direction we never anticipated. And I think that we need these kinds of elements of culture, of history, of dialogue, all of the different cultures of the world, because we'll be seeing new ones. I think sometimes about how science fiction is, whether it was like the word robot coming from Rossum's Universal Robots, or other words where we've had concepts historically that have sent us forward into the future with science and with fiction. With engineering, perhaps there's engineering fiction or math fiction as well. And we should remember that all of those things help us invent, and that we build on what we have in the past. And if we're not doing that, then there won't be a foundation that we can stand on later. So just ringing the bell for history over here. Ding, ding.
Well taken, Mark. So we're in the last 10 minutes here, and I wanted to show some of the amazing sci-fi artwork that Mark has been doing. And kind of leading into that, there's a question about who all do we need in terms of discovery for the future, right? And one of the things there is the more voices, the better. And we often design the future based on ourselves in mind, but the future is going to be lived by the younger generation. So the people who are still in school, the people who haven't been born. And we're also looking for people like that. So we do crowdsourcing challenges, or in school. You're welcome to participate. Please scan the QR code. I'll keep plugging that. Contact any one of us. We'd be happy to work with you and get your thoughts. So back to the storytelling, Diane. So the process we go through, even though we are imagining futures, it's not so important that we imagine a particular future, more that we have enough diversity of futures that now we can start to think about threats and opportunities, and what strategies might we employ to avoid the threats and to maybe go towards more desirable outcomes for all. Yes, we don't all see eye to eye, but there's some things that are better for all than others. And so anyway, along those lines, there's three strategic vectors that we identified. One of them is democratized design, development, and deployment, decisioning for ecosystem wellness, and then sustainability integrated through aviation. So there's three of these strategies. And so here's one concept within that. And I wonder, Mark, if you would mind explaining this graphic. It's really cool.
Yeah, we were wondering what would it be like if we were living in a future city that could take care of us at our weakest moment. Let's say that you're walking down the street and the city's keeping track of you, keeping track of your heart rate, keeping track of all the different details of your body, maybe down to a molecular level. But suddenly, it's a heart attack. In this instance, the man falls down. The drone is able to be assembled quickly from the resident tiles and the systems of the buildings themselves. We can imagine that streetlights could detach and follow us home so that we're able to have light on the walk home. We can also imagine that systems that could quickly self-assemble would be able to help us in emergency situations, call for help, and then that help would be able to arrive. Or if the help couldn't arrive, then more of, for example, self-assembling tiles could break free of the buildings and streets around you. In this instance, it was also a lot of fun to work with both physical media like watercolor, work with Midjourney, work with DALL-E, and actually using some of the same imagery, glue pieces together so you can see that there's slightly different treatments that I've layered on top of the others, trying to give a shifting perspective of something that's very dynamic, but also somehow broken apart. We don't know where it's going to shift to next. Thanks, Vic.
Thanks, Mark. I think we have another graphic as well. It might be interesting to go to the airship refueling one.
Yeah, I love this one. Yeah. All right, so we start in New York with some full batteries. And look, we have tiny pods using the Quada effect and other kinds of advanced technology that has been vetted by NASA engineers. The pod is able to be lifted into this egg case kind of carton carrying system that in the middle of the image is carried by the drone all the way across the Atlantic. And then the case is dropped off over in Paris. The pods unload and the people there are able to take the batteries, or the batteries might automatically be charged. However, there's an alternate route. Instead of joining the egg case carrier, you can take your pod all the way up to an airship. These airships, with substantial investigation and ongoing argument, look to be one of the most amazing viable futures for us in aeronautics. We've underscored really with the crash well, I won't even name it. We see right now a bright future in front of us. Let's be optimistic here, because these airships have, especially hybridized airships, so many capabilities for bridging vast distances at really considerable speeds and sharing resources with pods and other smaller airships that could join up with it. Also taking us, by the way, to Paris.
Yeah, I love the concept of starting to build bridges and infrastructure up into different levels of orbit, right? It just opens up the sky is no longer the limit, right? It's but the technology is evolving, and you can see these futures shaping up. So
what if airports flew? Can airports fly? Why not?
Right? Yeah.
And we were imagining people doing extreme sports off these airships in this fantastical universe. But yeah, and there's drones flying between the airships and these long distance things, exchanging fuels, power sources. You can imagine all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like we're at the end of the discussion. So I'd like to thank Diane and Mark, and it was a wonderful discussion, and hopefully people will continue this discussion. So scan the QR code, send us your questions. If there's any final question, maybe we could take one more, but glad to talk further. And I wonder if you could put up the QR code again, just so that people can have access to that. Thank you. And thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day. It's been a pleasure, and I'm going to hand it back to Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Hope to talk to folks again soon.